Welcome to Rugby Uncovered. I'm Paul Rodriguez, and this week Tom Nash speaks to Nicky Ponsford. She's head of women's performance at the RFU.
Nicky, good morning.
Hi.
You played in England women's first ever test match in 1987, and you have won the World Cup as a player. You've won the World Cup under your current administration. This is a fairly large question, so I apologise in advance, but what are the key differences between rugby, women's rugby in this country in 2020 compared with that in 1987?
I think there's a number of differences really. One, I suppose, is the sheer size of the game. When I first started playing, there weren't that many teams. It's significantly bigger now, with nearly 40,000 registered women and girls playing. That's a lot bigger than it was. So there's a much wider talent pool, I suppose, to pick from. The game itself is becoming more and more professional, and that's professional with both a small P and a large P. Because I'd like to think that, and we certainly all thought we were being as professional as we could back in 1987, and you work at something as hard as you possibly can. But I think the understanding of rugby, the support that is available to players now makes it more and more professional. And certainly, you see the majority of the Alliance Premier 15s teams that have got full-time support staff, full-time coaches, strength and conditioning, medical support. The amount of support that players get, both as a team and individually, is significantly different from where it was. Obviously, players there's quite a number of players that are paid for playing now, which is a big difference. We were very much in the era where you paid to do things, and that was where we started from. And ultimately, everybody has to start from there in order to grow the game. But I think that was very much where we were. And I think the other piece that's very different now, because of the support, because of the professionalization of the game, the game is now is quicker. There's probably a lot more power in the game than it was, technically and tactically. I think the girls are continuing to move forward and really to drive standards. So you'd say overall that standards across the game are increasing sort of week in, week out, and we see lots of outstanding skill sets from players who are in the England side and those that aren't, and that's brilliant to see. And strength and depth that we're looking at from an England perspective is growing all the time. So sure. Probably a long answer to a long question.
Well, presumably your mark of success in your 30 years plus in the position is also the grassroots and everything that you've just said, filtering all the way down to the base of the pyramid.
I think, I would say that if we were judging success of the women's game, then yes, we would have to say that those things are marks of success. We're now in, I suppose the other piece is we're now in a very different situation. We went through from the Rugby Football Union for Women, where we were our own governing body, albeit affiliated to the men's game, to now being a fully included and integrated into the RFU. And there's now significant support in the RFU to help drive the women's game forward, and that makes a massive difference. And I suppose some of the success that we saw as the RFUW has meant that we've been able to drive that integration with the RFU. And I think the support that they're giving us at the moment is great. And we see the difficult times that everybody's in at the moment, and yet we've continued to have support from the RFU to help support the success of certainly the England team and Red Roses, playing the international games that we're playing at the moment.
Sure. In your position as chair of the European Women's Rugby Commission, I guess the idea of that, many people refer to it, was to have some kind of popularization of the game across Europe, rather than just having a Six Nations, having a kind of European championship that might evolve. Is that something that you see happening?
I think the most important thing that we're looking at, we've got there's a lot of countries in Europe that play sevens. At last count, I think there was 34 unions that played international sevens at some level, and we didn't have that many teams that played 15s. Last count, there were I think we're up to 17 teams that have either playing Six Nations, Rugby Europe Championship, or and partly sort of COVID may affect this situation, but then there were another 8 teams that wanted to play in the Rugby Europe Trophy. So, I think cementing a foundation of both sevens and 15s across Europe was where we wanted to get to. Now, what that leads to, I think there's still some way to go. But it was about making sure that the 15s program, where you've got opportunities for everybody to play, that you've got domestic structures, so that we've actually got something to base rugby on, and that it's not a foundation of sand. It's proper bricks and cement that means the game will continue to grow and evolve, rather than just be a game for probably a relatively small number of people who are outstanding athletes. 15s is always the game where it's the game for all shapes and sizes, and that's one of the big things that we've been trying to push, to try and make sure that that, as I say, that is the rock of the game across Europe.
Sure. We've spoken with people from Germany and the Czech Republic and Iran and the Netherlands, the Czech Republic. They all refer to sevens, not to the detriment of 15s, but that seems to be the main game going on, the main format going on in their countries. Another difficult question coming up: Do you see the two formats merging at any stage, or do you think there'll always be two different games?
I think there'll always be two different games, but I think I suppose the crossover, and then I suppose sevens is a relatively easy game to play, in terms of you need less people. It's probably easier to understand the rules of sevens than it is of 15s. But I think the two can feed from each other. I don't think it has to be one or the other. And I think actually it's about, if you've got a good 15s program, then you've got more players playing. You've got probably players playing more regularly, because it lends itself to a sort of probably a domestic format, league format, rather than sevens, which probably doesn't in the same way. So by having that sort of foundation, it's easier to then probably build on sevens as well. I know a number of countries have started the game through getting people interested by playing sevens and then developing out to 15s. And I think that's what we're seeing, as we see more and more teams. As I say, I think at the last count, we were looking at 17 teams across Europe that wanted to play international 15s. Now that includes the Six Nations teams, but 17 teams across Europe playing international 15s, I think is a pretty good number, and that's where a lot of those teams have played sevens, have use sevens to kind of drive 15s, and are now using 15s as the bedrock, and then still being able to play 15s international rugby and sevens international rugby. So the two work together rather than against each other, I think.
Sure. I mean, rugby is unusual in that there are very few sports where you've got two different formats that are almost as big one as the other. You can understand a country because of its TV friendliness, because of its international tournament status, etc., etc. If it did develop a sevens team, just thinking, well, that's fine. We'll do that. We'll go for the Olympics. We'll go for international tournaments. I'm sorry, I'm playing devil's advocate, but this is what we've come across in the last few weeks in European countries and beyond.
Yeah, no, and I think you're right, but I think that we're seeing more and more that, I suppose the Netherlands is a really good example where it had a good 15s program, decided to focus in on sevens, and are now actually really pushing the 15s program and continuing to develop the 15s program, because actually it supports their domestic program more effectively. And having a good domestic program is probably the thing that ultimately drives success, because if you've got players playing week in, week out, then you've got the interest in the game, you've got the talent pool to select from, you've got standards rising all the time because people are pushing standards all the time. So I think having the 15s domestic game is probably where a lot of countries are looking to probably drive some of that work going forward. So absolutely. And I think there will always be some countries that just choose to play sevens, and that's absolutely fine, I think. But the more countries that we can get to play both, probably the wider the reach of rugby will ultimately become.
Sure. Returning to our country, the Premier 15s is now in the second stage of its 6-year cycle. Are you happy with the way things have gone for the first 3 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we looked at where we got to at the end of year 3, I think everybody, other than the fact that we didn't actually get to finish the season, but the first 2.5 years, I think everybody was really kind of delighted with where we got to, where individual teams had driven the women's program, their infrastructure within the club, the quality of players that they had within the club. I think that's probably progressed significantly further than we thought it might have done in the first 3 years, and certainly made a big leap from the start of when we announced those first 10 teams to where we got to at the end of year 3. I think was significantly different, and delighted with where it's going and where we're seeing it start to progress. I think even further now in this short period of time since we've started year 4.
We've seen a quite significant difference in the space of a year in terms of improvement and skill levels and fitness and strength and conditioning and all those good things. We've been very impressed with the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're delighted with where we're getting to, and I think I think the important thing is that we have to celebrate where we get to, but actually don't let that stop any long-term growth, because I think we've still got a long way that we can travel to get to be as good as we can possibly be. And I think there's lots of things that we can do as a union and clubs can do, and working together, I think we've got some really exciting times to come.
Brilliant. Nicky, thanks so much. It's been a pleasure. Best of luck this weekend to you all, and we'll speak again soon, I hope.
Yeah, no problem. All right.
Thanks so much.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
And thank you so much for listening. We'll catch you next time.